What a story this became this week. A student at the University of Oklahoma claiming religious discrimination after an essay she wrote was given a 0.
American print and broadcast journalism are party to Oklahoma U's employment law violation of Mel Kurth, predicated on a lie of arbitrary grading and religious discrimination. In November 2025, Samantha Fulnecky, a psychology major at Oklahoma U, filed a religious discrimination complaint after receiving a 0 out of 25-point grade for a psychology class essay twice. In response, the university suspended, then fired the first instructor, Mel Kurth, and removed the second from the class. The university determined the assignment would not count towards her final grade as it had been graded, quote, arbitrarily, unquote. The campus's Turning Point USA chapter supported Samantha online, targeting Mel Kurth, a transgender woman, by stating, quote, we should not be letting mentally ill professors around students, unquote. Their post went viral, receiving national attention. Almost all reporting focused on every aspect of the controversy except the crucial piece of information their audience needed to reason about the grade Fulnecky's essay received. They cited the essay's grading criteria. They interviewed and cited the student. They covered student protests supporting the instructors. They quoted TPUSA and right-wing politicians demanding heads roll or claiming universities are pushing unscientific and political agenda, a staple accusation of America's right wing for over a half-century. In all their coverage, they left out the subject of the study and its findings, choosing instead to pigeonhole it as an entry in the culture wars by describing it as an article on gender roles.
It was about gender roles.
On gender roles.
Or gender expectations.
Societal gender expectations.
Or that the essay was given a 0 because it referenced the Bible.
Because she cited the Bible.
Positioning the paper as standing opposite to conservative views on gender roles, and seemingly taking their cue from Fulnecky's own characterizations.
The article was about gender stereotypes in children and mental health and things like that.
The few who bothered to read the paper recognized why the essay received a 0. In short, the university's claim of arbitrary grading and the accusation of religious discrimination doesn't make any sense with any knowledge of the actual paper. With that thought in mind, I will summarize the purpose, method, and findings of the research so you are in the position to judge the essay yourself with respect to the grading criteria and any claims of religious discrimination or free speech suppression. In fact, once you have a better understanding of the research itself, you might see Samantha's and the journalistic community's reaction in a very different light. Recent media coverage of teen suicides led to a widespread public discourse about the impact of teasing on adolescents, particularly when that teasing was related to teens, quote, not fitting in, unquote, is a typical boy or typical girl. In addition, media coverage has highlighted the ways that peers harass and ostracize boys and girls who are deemed atypical for their gender. Little empirical research, however, has examined how being atypical for one's gender is related to peer harassment. Thus, the goal of the current research is to examine how peer relations, both positive peer relationships, being popular or liked, and negative peer relationships, being teased or harassed, are associated with being either gender typical or gender atypical. The study also examined the relationship between typicality, popularity, and likability. Because it had been shown young adolescents prize popularity over friendship, and popularity is associated with social influence and control. The authors mention this influence and typicality very likely enforce and maintain group norms, regardless of whether their peers like them or not. In other words, classmates very likely emulate popular peers, and popular children could also compel the behavior of others. Whoever heard of a clique ringleader urging their buddies to target a misfit?
Why you reading, bitch?
Because I like to read, and this is a really good book.
Specifically, the current study will examine 1. Whether typical characteristics are associated with being popular. 2. Whether atypical characteristics are associated with rejection/teasing. 3. Whether the degree of typicality is associated with the degree of popularity. And 4. Whether teasing due to gender atypicality explains the link between low levels of typicality and more negative mental health. The next section describes research linking gender typicality to positive peer relations, such as being popular and liked, followed by a description of research linking gender atypicality with negative peer relations, such as being rejected and teased, and concludes with research linking gender typicality to positive mental health outcomes and the potential role of teasing as a mediator of this relationship. This study surveyed 84 students between the ages of 11 and 15 from a single public middle school. They were first asked to describe popular boys and popular girls in 5 words, as well as describe picked on or left out boys and girls in 5 words. These words were analyzed and clustered into typical and atypical characteristics. The 3 most common stereotypical descriptions for boys were athletic, tall/strong, and popular with girls. The 3 most common stereotypical descriptions for girls was pretty, nice, and stylish, or wears nice clothes. They were asked to rate their own typicality, rank the typicality of their classmates, rank their classmates' popularity and likability, if they had experienced teasing, and questions about their mental health. Overall, popular peers were thought of as typical. Popularity and likability are related, but distinct. Popular students aren't the most liked students. The authors suggest, at least implicitly, children feel pressure to be gender typical in order to gain or maintain popularity. Teasing is explicit pressure to be typical. For boys, being perceived by peers and perceiving oneself as high in gender typicality was associated with more popularity and likability, less gender-based teasing, and more positive mental health outcomes. For girls, being perceived by peers as high in gender typicality was associated with more popularity and likability, but more negative body image and gender anxiety. Athleticism and independence were counted towards popularity for girls, meaning that 2 stereotypically male traits contribute popularities to girls. Adolescent girls can be more atypical than boys over these criteria. For boys, high typicality is overwhelmingly positive, and conversely, low typicality is overwhelmingly negative. For girls, however, there is a double-edged sword of typicality, as it is associated with positive social outcomes, but more negative mental health outcomes. In their closing remarks, the authors note the limitations of the study, its small sample size and uniform cultural population, white and European, limits any ability to generalize to other populations of adolescents. They urge research to explore if school gender stereotyping and enforcement or stereotype neutrality influences the association between typicality and popularity in students. With the details of the paper in hand and a quick reminder of grading criteria, it is fair to say, 1, she demonstrates she understands the paper, and 2, her essay got a 0 because her essay does not reflect the paper's findings. It reflects her reaction to the emotions surfaced by the paper.
It's the only defense mechanism I have against deeper, more terrifying problems buried inside of me.
Jewell and Brown holds a mirror to everyone's adolescence. Fulnecky did not like what she saw. Teasing is central to her sense of self. God and the Bible are a stand-in for her sense of self, and it's on display in every paragraph. The opening sentence of an essay announces its topic, and here gender role represents her identity. The bulk of her essay is devoted to God's role for women. Gender roles is simply not the topic of this research paper. Gender, popularity, and teasing are, and clearly, teasing is a hot-button issue for her. Special pleading rejects documented negative health outcomes for teasing, and a naturalistic fallacy rejects mental health harm inflicted over atypicality. The semantic translation is, my teasing reflects God's beauty. Teasing aligns with the gifts and abilities God gave me as a woman. Paragraph 1 probably should contribute 1 point to her grade because it's clear she read the paper and understands its content. But logical fallacy cannot contribute to the essay score. The semantic content of paragraph 2 is a demand her peers validate teasing. In other words, without this validation, her gender, i.e. her sense of self, is diminished. Paragraph 3 opens with the remarkable assertion that adolescents don't emulate others to build standing, or that ostracism isn't punishment. Her claims that, quote, society, unquote, is pushing multiple genders or individual truth is not present in Jewell Brown and are therefore red herrings. These statements cannot contribute to her essay score. The Bible remains the stand-in for her right to police other people. It's demonic if I can't police other people's behavior. There would be fewer gender issues and insecurities if they submitted to me. She has a right to say whatever she wants, but she doesn't have a right to an A. It's also worthwhile noting that Fulnecky exhibits the 5 traits associated with female popularity. She's pretty, nice, well-dressed, athletic, and independent, where the last 2 are male stereotype-coded traits. Maybe she didn't like hearing that 2 pillars of her identity are male-coded. Might explain some of her remarks. Because popular girls run a higher risk of poor body image and anxiety, maybe she didn't like hearing that either. In paragraph 4, she argues that humanity and kindness towards others is satanic, and not being able to tease whomever she wants to strips her of her feminine identity. Make ostracism great again. She receives the injunction against teasing as an affront to her personal identity. Lurking in the periphery, it's quite possible that the mention of athleticism and independence as male-coded stereotype was new to her, which she received as pressure to eliminate gender or proliferate gender. A score of 0 is a perfectly fair grade because outside of perhaps a point, because she demonstrated she understood the article, nothing in the essay has anything to do with the research. Only the emotions surfaced by its findings. Psychological speculation aside, Oklahoma U fired Melkurth on false pretense and subjected a second graduate instructor to unjustified treatment as well. The 0 score was not arbitrary. Print media and journalism failed in their responsibility to report adequately on this topic so that the public was informed enough to reason about the grade and the university's treatment of the 2 graduate teaching instructors. The university's decision to exclude the paper from counting towards her class grade is still warranted, I think. It's reasonable to ask whether she should have been offered counseling. Fulnecky was accepted to Oklahoma based on an athletic scholarship, but was redshirted. Redshirting is used to address scholastic or athletic deficiencies in student athletes. I won't venture to guess why she was redshirted, but honor students from high schools can experience a certain amount of sticker shock in a collegiate environment because the academic achievement of their peers is suddenly much higher than the environment they experienced in high school, and the cultural pool is much more diverse, and they may not be ready for it. She is going to have to come to terms with the fact that academic studies require behavior different from what she's used to, at least if she wants to pursue a degree in psychology. As for the news coverage, media long ago sacrificed meaningful reporting for the expedient of boilerplate content. By misrepresenting Jewell and Brown as an article on gender roles or societal gender expectations, or that Fulnecky's essay received an F because she cited the Bible, print and broadcast journalism not only failed their primary duty to inform the public, they became party to Oklahoma U's employment law violation of Melkurth, predicated on a lie of arbitrary grading and religious discrimination.
When I see somebody reading for fun, it makes me feel that much more stupid. And then I get mad.
I didn't know that. Thanks so much for opening up to me.